Are you tired of working so hard for too little gain personally and or professionally? Join us for today's podcast where I share my personal story on founding the Institute for Birth Healing and the Birth Healing Summit and how I found the magic of physical therapy.
Hello, friends. This is Lynn Schulte, and you are listening to the Birth Healing Summit podcast. We are here for meaningful conversations that will transform the way you work with pregnant and postpartum clients. Whether it is a new perspective, tool, or technique, you'll be able to implement it into your practice today. I invite you to sit back, listen with an open mind, and grab the golden nugget today's guest has to offer. Now let's get started.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Birth Healing Summit podcast. And today we are going to be talking about me. So if you have listened to any of my Birth Healing Summit interviews over the years, you've probably learned little bits and pieces about me throughout the years in those interviews. And today I thought I'd do a podcast for those of you who might want to know a little bit more about me. But I also thought I would like to share some of my greatest insights as well. So it's not just this boring story of me. Well, I don't think it's boring, but you may. So please know that throughout this, you're going to learn some key insights that I've gathered in living my life. So let me start off by just sharing some fun facts. I grew up in St. Louis, in a suburb of St. Louis. I was the middle child. I have an older brother and a younger sister, and both of my parents have passed. And that is interesting for those of you who no longer have your parents there. I kind of feel like you're unanchored to the world anymore. Like the people who brought you to this earth are no longer with us. And it's just a very different feeling. I played sports throughout high school. So I was an athlete. I played basketball and soccer and tennis. And I went to sport. I went to state in every sport that I played. For those of you not in the US, state is kind of the championships of your high school competition. You have your regional teams that you play, and then you go to state, and that's like the Super Bowl or whatever it is. But I did actually win state in my basketball team senior year. So I was a co-captain of the state championship basketball team in 1986. And there is a huge picture of my team over the doors of the gym going into my high school. So that was really fun. I then went to St. Louis University for PT school after I graduated from high school. And I really wanted to get out of town. I wanted to leave Missouri, St. Louis, wanted to get out of town, but I also really wanted a program that had entry-level PT admission, and SLU offered that, and I got in. And so that's why I ended up going to SLU. But it was a fabulous education. I loved it. And I actually graduated, to my surprise, summa cum laude. I had no idea. But I would have to say, yeah, that makes me seem smart, but I was just a really good test taker. And I studied hard. But as far as being a good clinician, I don't feel like it fully translated. My best friend in PT school, Amy, I feel turned out to be a much better clinician than I was, but I was a really good test taker. So, but I do have to say that I have always been on a personal and spiritual growth path. That has always been super important to me. I feel the more that I can grow, the more I can help others do the same. And so, I grew up Catholic, and went to church every Sunday with my parents. And then things kind of transitioned as I moved along. But after I graduated from PT school, I made my way to Seattle, and I worked for a temporary company where I did temp jobs of filling in for maternity leaves or vacations or things like that, and got to do these short-term assignments here, there, and everywhere. And they asked me to work in a nursing home one time, and I was like, I don't know about that. But I went in and I loved it. I absolutely loved working with the elderly. And I actually took on a full-time job working for a company in a nursing home. And I did that for several years until 1998, when they had a massive reimbursement change in how they were reimbursing rehab in nursing homes. And we went from a PT staff of 32, a rehab staff of 32 to 8. And 1998 was the year I was getting married. So my job, I still had my job, but I actually gave it away to someone else because I was getting married. And I actually got a job working for a therapeutic associates. I know they're still around. I just saw them at CSM this year. I worked in West Seattle. I worked in West Seattle and Renton and Ballard. They had 3 different locations, and I started their women's health program. So I was just working part-time 3 days a week. And because Kathy Wallace was also working for Therapeutic Associates at the time, so they paid Kathy to train me. So I got to work one-on-one learning from the master. Thank you, Kathy. It was really fun. But that was a great connection that I got. And I worked for them for several years. I also did part-time home health during that time to fill in the other 2 days. And then after I got married, I shortly became pregnant. And I had my first baby in 2000. And after that experience of giving birth, it lit a fire in me. I was so excited about the birth process. I had a pretty great birth. It was 7 hours start to finish. He came out smoothly. I did it without, I got a light narcotic, which I really regret, but didn't get an epidural or anything. And I was just lit on fire about birth. And I was like, I need to get into this. I need to be a part of this process somehow. I don't know how. I mean, I thought about becoming a midwife, or I didn't know about doulas at the time, but I was like, do I become a midwife? I don't want to go back to medical school and become an OBGYN, but I was at that time, I was like, oh my gosh, I have to get into birth somehow. Well, then I had a little baby to take care of, and I still worked part-time 2 days a week in the clinic, starting that women's health program or keeping that going. And, life took over. I had another baby 2 years later, and now I have 2 little ones under 2, and I'm still working for the same company. And I was making the same pay for about 5 years. And I finally was like, I'd really like to make more money here. And one of the directors at one of the clinics sat me down and goes, Lynn, you're at the top of the pay scale. You'll never make more money here. You need to go start your own business. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I have 2 kids under the age of 4. There's no way I can start my own business. And I just had all these reasons in my head of, no, too much work. I can't do it. There's 2 little kids. And I actually went to a personal development program, T. Harv Eker, if any of you guys know him, went to one of his programs, and I broke through a wood board. I broke a wood in half where it said I can't do it on one side and I can do it on the other side. I broke through it, felt really empowered, and I went home and I started working on starting my own business. So I did do it. I started my own practice in West Seattle and was doing women's health there. And I really became known for the only PT in the Seattle area that was also doing visceral manipulation as a women's health PT. So that was kind of my niche. And I loved working with my mamas. And at the time, I was working out of an office in my backyard. We had a half garage, half office, and my kiddos were going to school in my backyard. So the school was literally across the alleyway from where we lived. And I could watch my kids walk to school. I could watch them at playgrounds at recess. It was kind of fun. But then I had my clients coming to the house there. And I thought when I first started my business that I had to work till 6 o'clock because that's what we did in the clinic. And so I have to work till 6 o'clock to get those people who need to come in after they are done working. And Lisa, who was a good friend of mine at the time, she challenged me on that belief. And she's like, Linny, she called me Linny. She's like, Linny, you don't need to work. You should just work 9 to 3 while your kids are in school. This is too hard on your family. You should just work 9 to 3. And I'm like, but Lisa, I've got to work on, after people get off work. And she goes, no, Lynn, if they want to come see you, they'll figure out a way to make it work. And so I was like, huh. So I changed my hours to 9 to 3, and boy, was it a much better fit for my family. And I have to tell you, I feel the universe tests your decisions sometimes. And I had, right after I made that change to my hours, I had one person call me up and say, "Oh, you don't work till 6? I work till 5, and you don't see people later in the day." And I'm like, "No, I'm sorry, I don't. I'm done at 3." I never had anyone else ask me or question my hours again. To me, it was like the universal test of, are you sure about this? Are you sure you want to create a boundary with your hours? And as soon as I said, nope, I'm sorry, I'm done at 3, I never had anyone else question me on that. So that's one of my little insights. I feel like once you create a boundary, the universe may test you to make sure that you're solid on your boundary. And then once you are, you're done. So keep that in mind, okay? Um, so this was also Lisa, who, called me Linny. Lisa also got introduced to a spiritual guru. So remember, I grew up Catholic. Then when I was living in Seattle, I kept I tried to find some Catholic churches to go to, but they were all families or people who were really old. And I never found, I was young, I was single, and my roommate at the time was actually going to a Presbyterian church. And so she turned me on to this Presbyterian church who had this huge singles group. So there was a single group for people in their 20s, for people in their 30s, for their 40s and 50s. I mean, it was massive. And so I started going to the Presbyterian church, and I was still going there until Lisa introduced me to a spiritual Hindu guru. And I was like, well, that's interesting. So I went and I checked her out, and I started following her for a little bit. And that was really outside my realm of experience because I grew up Catholic and then Presbyterian, very Christian based. And then, to explore this Hindu based religion was definitely a change for me. But I enjoyed it. And I went to one of her retreats, and I could really feel a huge opening in my heart. And so that was something that I really was like, wow, this is really good. And so I am following the spiritual guru. I am seeing clients out of my practice only from 9 to 3. And I kept getting this feeling after a while that I really shouldn't take insurance anymore. And that I needed to, I forgot to say that when I started my PT practice, I did start a insurance-based practice. And but after a couple of years in and working with a spiritual guru and everything, I just kept getting the feeling that I needed to get rid of the insurance practice. But that was a large majority of my income, and I was really afraid of making that transition to cash base. And I have to tell you, another one of my insights was that when spirit wants you to do something and you don't listen, something's going to happen that's not always fun. So I would encourage you, when spirit wants you to do something, to find the way, find the courage to make it happen so that you don't have to have a negative experience around it to get you to do it. Um, I always say spirit starts with a whisper, and then it starts yelling at you, and then it comes at you with a 2x4 or maybe a baseball bat, then a 2x4. And then, until we finally get the lesson or whatever it is that we need to make changes in. And so I was hesitant. I didn't make the change to cash base. And I had a guy that I was seeing. He was a labor and industries case. So it was a work comp case. He got attacked. Well, he says he got attacked at work by a coworker who put his hand on his shoulder and his fist between his legs and like lifted him up. And this guy's a really big guy, and he had a teddy bear of a heart. I just really adored him as a person, but he was having pelvic pain, and because his testicles got crunched from his hand going between his legs, and he probably had pudendal neuralgia at the time. And I didn't really know how to best help him. I knew there was trauma. I knew there was emotion involved in it, but I didn't really know how to quite access it just yet back then. And I kept like, he wasn't getting better. And I would send notes to the doctor going, here's his progress, but I don't feel like we're getting anywhere. And I don't know what else to do. And he kept saying, keep seeing him, keep seeing him. So I saw that guy for 32 times. And what ended up happening is that his employer um, created a lawsuit against him saying that the injury never happened at work. Well, he took it all the way up to the Supreme Court, and the company won. So that means that the employer, the employee, the guy that I was seeing, had to pay back all of its practitioners, all the money that L and I paid, and us practitioners had to pay back labor and industries all the money that we received from his treatment. And we needed to get that money from the employee who hadn't worked in 2 years. So it was really, really frustrating. And it was really a sign for me, like, I need to get out of this insurance-based practice. But at that time when that happened, I ended up having to pay like $3,500 back to LNI, and they were so nasty about collecting it from me. I'll never forget that. But at that time, my husband and I were living in Boulder, living in West Seattle, and he kept saying, this doesn't feel right. This doesn't feel right. And I go, what do you mean? He goes, I don't know. It just doesn't feel like where we should live. And I go, well, let's just stay open and see what happens. Well, we got 3 different signs that we should move to Boulder. So in 2008, we packed up and moved our family to Longmont, Colorado. And I had to start all over again. And this time when I started over, I'm like, I'm only doing cash base. So that was my way that I was able to transition. But I also had to start all over in building my business. And I ended up giving talks to postpartum women about the changes that were going on in their body. And I did that for over a year trying to build my practice. And it wasn't until I learned how to make an offer and get them to pay for a session on the spot there that I really started growing my business. And as I was doing that, I got a call one day from a person. This woman calls me up and she's like, do you do vaginal massage? And I was just taken aback a little bit by that question because I've never been asked that before. And I was like, well, what do you mean? And I go, well, I do intravaginal work, sure, yeah, but I don't really call it vaginal massage. Why do you ask? And she goes, well, I'm in this book club and we're reading this book, and I asked her the name of the book and she told me, but we kept continuing on, and I was just kind of hemming and hawing about this, claiming that I did vaginal massage. When I'm like, well, sure, I work with the pelvic floor muscles. I know how to do intravaginal work, but as a physical therapist, we don't really say, yes, I do vaginal massage. So at the end of the call, she's like, oh, I think I'm going to look for someone else. Okay, thanks. And then I hung up and I'm like, oh, what was the name of that book that she told me about? That sounded interesting. So then like 2 days later, I get another phone call and the gal goes, do you do vaginal massage? And I go, yes, what's the name of the book? And she told me it was Wild Feminine. And I got the book and I read the book front to cover and I was enamored. I mean, that book brought so much joy and so much excitement out of me that I had to go learn from Tammy Kent. I did her holistic pelvic care. And I would have to say that doing that work and understanding that, what was interesting at the time is that I was already kind of doing that kind of work. And Tammy Lynn Kent's work just kind of gave me a framework of a better way, kind of like the recipe to working with the body. And it was so powerful for me. There's a lot of other things that came on board. I also got in, at Tammy's course, I had an experience where we did this, worked with our own birth energy of how we came into the world. And I came in breech. I just remember my dad saying that I was breech. And I didn't understand how I came out breech, like if I was butt first or feet first or whatever. And so I worked with this midwife at Tammy's course, and my left leg jutted out and my right leg was held back. And or was it the opposite? I forget now. But I was trying to put myself out there, but I was holding myself back, basically was the energy of how I was born into the world. And I shifted that. And oh my goodness, I tapped into some energy that was like the universes of universes. It was so expansive for me. It was like worth price of admission. I was just blown away by that experience. And I was also at the time introduced to another spiritual path called Eckankar. And I started following this path of Eckankar. And I have to say that this path has been responsible for the greatest amount of change that I have experienced in my life. And it has opened up my heart to a greater understanding of love than I've ever had. And I'm very, very grateful, super grateful for the path of Eckankar and for following and studying that path. And all of that kind of led to me realizing that my marriage wasn't supporting me in my highest and best growth. And so in 2012, I ended up getting divorced. It was a very spirit-led thing. Spirit guided me to like this is what needs to happen. We were really good friends, but it was very interesting at the time that all these amazing things were happening to me in my business. My husband at the time was very contracting and very like the house was too big, this was too much, and I was like ready to expand and like, what do you mean this house is too big, this is fine. And I just was like in expansion mode and he was in contraction mode. And then my new idea of love, understanding of love, just kind of made our love that we were sharing not work anymore. And so that was the reason for me needing to move on and away from my marriage, because I grew up Catholic. I believe that, once you get married, you're married for life. And I've now come around to the term that, marriages are good for the couple as long as both are continuing to grow together. But when that's not happening, then I think it is in our highest and best good to part ways and continue our learning and growing in the best way possible. So however that needs to happen, I became more open to divorce. So uh going through that divorce, it's hell, everybody. I would not encourage anyone. I really work on your stuff, try to make it happen. But if it can't happen, then it's hell going through it, but there is light at the end of the tunnel, and it does smooth out, and it really has been the best for everybody in my family, kids included. So at that time, I'm still seeing postpartum clients, I'm running my own practice. And that's when I started discovering like all these patterns that I started finding in the postpartum body. And it was these like whispers from spirit that I kept hearing as I was working on people, like, check that out, look at this, look at that, and I discovered, started really palpating and feeling the bones. And I've taken craniosacral, I've taken visceral manipulation, and really learning how to kind of sense into more of the energy, the flow of the body. That really did influence my being able to feel and palpate of like, what does this body really want to do? What is the energy of this bone really wanting to do? And that's when I discovered that, those pelvic bones, they splay apart to open for a baby to come on out. I started looking at all the birthing books, the Birthing Pelvis by Blandane. I can't remember her name, but I would love to get her on the summit. Anyway, she's written several books on the pelvis, and that was just eye-opening to really look at what happens for the mechanics of birth. And then I started to really feel like, wow, this pelvis is not going back. It's staying in this open birthing pattern is what I started to coin it. And then I figured out how to release those and get the bones back into a better position after birth. And it really changed a lot for my clients. So they're seeing all these different practitioners. They've been seeing them for months, still having back pain, and they come and see me and I get the bones back into place, and now they're out of pain in one session. It was like, wow, this is pretty cool. And so I started finding a lot of other patterns in the body too, and just realizing that, really taking a look at the mechanics of what's happening during pregnancy, what's happening during the birth, and then feeling in these bodies. Because really what was unique about my practice is that I was just seeing postpartum clients. So it wasn't like I was seeing all these different types of, clients coming in and laying on my table. I was mainly seeing young new moms. And that's what I think really helped me to be able to identify these patterns and see them and work with them and understand them and learn how to release those patterns from the body. And then, I was getting really good results. So I started putting on YouTube all these ideas and things that I was finding in the body. And early on, I developed these two little courses, little now compared to what I have now created now, but they were more for moms, and they were like how to prepare your body for birth and how to recover after birth. And I had them on my website, and I was like, well, how do I let people know about them? So I needed to figure out marketing. And I ended up taking a marketing online course. And then I signed up. I invested big time in myself and took a year-long marketing coaching program. And that was the biggest investment I've ever made. At $25,000 I put in hiring this marketing coach and really learning. And I've never invested in myself like that before, but I have to tell you, I really stepped up to the plate and learned a lot about marketing. And I also learned about how to do a summit as well. But however, one of the big insights I had was this coach was telling us to create these $1,000 programs, and these two little classes that I had put online, I'm like, I can't sell those for $1,000. I just can't do it. There was there's a lot of fear around that. And also recognizing that moms don't really like to spend a lot of money on themselves. And so to create $1,000 course, I knew I wanted to start working with entrepreneurs because I knew they would spend money on themselves. So I took Tammy Lynn's Kent and the work with the pelvic energy, and I created these online courses for entrepreneurs, and I started launching them and selling them, and I was successful with those. But I also had my PT practice over here, and I was for 2 years, I was struggling, trying to figure out how do I I'm running two separate businesses, and I could write 20 different blog posts about my postpartum mamas, but when it came to talking to entrepreneurs, I really didn't know what else I wanted to say to them. Um, I did have a PT take one of my, it was either Rich and Radiant or Rebirth Your Radiance, or one of those Claim Your Value, or some of the programs that I developed in that year-long coaching program. And she took one of those courses. And I ended up talking to her in 2016. This was in August of 2016. I was talking to her and I was like, I'm just really struggling. And oh my God, it's the pressure. I knew there was something that I needed to be doing. I knew I had this like inner drive, inner desire to be doing something, but I knew I was off and I just couldn't figure it out. And finally, talking to this PT who did my online programs, she's like, Lynn, it's merging these two. It's actually taking this work to the practitioners and teaching them what you know about this. And I was just like, light bulb moment. And when I was talking to her, I'm like, I feel like I need to like start an institute or something. I need to share what I know in working with postpartum moms. And that was kind of the creation of the institute, was back in 2016. In August of it, I got the idea and created the Institute for Birth Healing. And I actually held my first course in October of 2016. And that was also around the time that, other story I want to share first. In August, I was getting these Facebook messages from this Katerina Perkovov, who is this gal from Russia. And she was reaching out to me. She's like, I want to take all your work. I want to translate it to Russia. I want to help all your books, all your materials, and translate it to Russia. And I kind of read it and not very focused while I was reading it. And I was distracted. And I was just like, oh my goodness, how much is that going to cost me? Thinking it was a scam. And then she kept being persistent, and she wrote me like 3 times, 3 Facebook messages. And finally, as I was reading through, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is wow, this is real. And I happened to have the conversation with my PT friend and got clear about the institute that I wanted to start on a Sunday. And on a Monday was when I read the Facebook messaging from Katerina and realized, oh my gosh, she's hosting a birth conference. She wants me to come speak. And by Friday that week, I was going to Russia to teach. So that was like massively fast. But I think looking back at it, it's like I needed to get clear on what it is that I was doing before I was able to see Katerina's message. And so it was so interesting. I think divine timing is huge. And it's excuse me, another insight that I would like to share with you all is that if you're having these desires that you need to be doing something, I have found personally that if I push and force something, and especially if I create anything out of fear, it never works out as well as if I allow the process to unfold as it unfolds. To me, that's always a much more successful way for me to make something happen versus me trying to force and make something happen. So it's more being in that feminine flow of allowing the timing to unfold. Um, and then it just unfolds magically. So there is that you still need to be taking steps and taking action. But if you find yourself forcing something to happen, I would step back and see where is it that you could start to get into the flow of doing something. And maybe it is a timing thing that you need to get clear on first. When I moved to Boulder and started my PT practice, I had heard that there was this Boulder maternity store and that Stephanie owned the store and that I should reach out to Stephanie and because she has people come give talks there. Well, it took me 9 months. I moved to Boulder, and I had heard about this a couple of months into moving, but it took me a good 9 months for me to connect with Stephanie. Well, once I connected with Stephanie, she had to have reached out and met this other person to have the information that she needed to give to me in order for me to do my pooch class. That's my How to Lose the Pooch for Good class that I started my business with. And had I met Stephanie before then, she wouldn't have had that information. So to me, that's kind of like, yes, it was frustrating for me to have to wait that long in order to get in contact with her, but the divine timing of it all needed to happen in that way. And so I just encourage you, if you're forcing something to happen, step back and really sit with it and see where you can start to get more into the flow of things and allow things to happen versus forcing things to happen. Okay. And as I was in this marketing group, and trying to create these two different programs, I realized that I created all this entrepreneur program out of fear. It was fear that they wouldn't buy the programs at that price point, and I didn't have enough personal power at the time to do it in my own way. And so fear should never be a foundation of any business decision. I just feel it never works out that way. And I am learning to only make business decisions out of love. And that truly is the foundation of the business that I am building the Institute from, is a foundation of love. I want everything that we do to be done in the name of love and to be done in a loving manner. And I find that things work out a much, much better that way. So in 2016 is when I founded the Institute for Birth Healing. And in 2017, I started doing summits. And this is another funny story. Sometimes I feel like I get tricked into things. And hosting the Birth Healing Summit, I got tricked into it. I was working down in Denver and I met this gal who had a Facebook group that was really popular. It was Natural Moms in Denver. And we met up and she came to me for a session and we started talking and we were both talking about how we needed to grow our businesses and everything. And I think she might have even mentioned something about a summit. And I'm like, oh, well, I should do a summit too. And we started, well, let's do one together because summits are a heck of a lot of work. They are a lot of work. And, sharing that workload with someone is much nicer than having to do it all on your own. And we started off, we decided it was going to be the Birth Healing Summit. And and when we went to buy the URL, I'm like, I want to buy it. And so I knew there was something about that. I just had that spirit guide in me, let me buy the URL. And, I did. And a month into our outreach and reaching out to things, she calls me up and she goes, Lynn, I can't do this. I don't have the time. I need to step out of this. And I was just like, okay, I guess I have to do this on my own then. So I did. And the first couple of years I think I did 3 summits that were both mom and practitioner combined. And they did okay. But in 2019, when I did my 4th summit, I think it was, where I actually just focused on the practitioner, that's when things really took off. And again, it's really getting more focused and clear on your niche, whatever you want to call it. That, like that was my ideal is I really need to be talking to practitioners. And that summit took off, and it's been great ever since. So um, that is how, like that's kind of my marketing piece. That is what I started the summits to get the information out about what I was finding in the postpartum bodies, and to help people to realize about this open birthing pattern. And I wanted practitioners to be aware of this, because when you close up that open birthing pattern, it really transforms the way a mom can activate her core, and her pelvic floor muscles contract so much better. And when you release these patterns, moms just feel and function so much better. So that was the impetus for why I started the summits, and it's been a fabulous platform for me. And I've now started to do these podcasts to help me to continue the conversation throughout the year. And I'm still keeping the summits as a more intensive study. I want to keep my podcast to be more shorter in duration, with little tidbits, and the summit is going to be more of a deeper dive. And so that is where I'm at. And I have learned so much about myself and about business and everything over these last several years. It has not been an easy journey. Running and owning your own business is not something that is easy. It's has its challenges, and it's also a great way for you to learn how to grow, because your own personal issues come up in running a business. I say owning a business and being a parent are two of the fastest ways for us to grow and reach enlightenment, because our kids are going to show us all of our stuff. They know how to push our buttons, and our businesses, when our businesses are not thriving, there's something within us that is keeping that from thriving. And we need to look deep inside and make those changes within us, and then you'll start to see different changes in your business as well. So I hasn't been easy, but I'm committed. I have seen and heard how much this work is changing people's lives, and I'm committed as ever to making sure I do my best to share this body of work with as many people as I can all over the world, because I know this work can help moms and help them to recover better and to function faster after birth. And I really hope more therapists and body workers will be looking for the open birthing pattern in the pelvis, and know how to help correct the bones of the pelvis first before doing any intravaginal work. And I also really want to help therapists to be able to know how to work with the tissues of the bodies when they're resistant to releasing. I want people to be confident and comfortable when emotion comes up in the body, and to know how to help someone who is having a reaction on the table, so that you can help safely guide them in a supportive way. And um, maybe you need to know how to learn how to dialogue with the body, or how to shift a limiting belief, or how to help release a trauma response in the body, or maybe it's working with the pelvic energy. The pelvic energy is such a great guide for us in helping to understand what's going on in our client's life. And I want to be able to share that with anybody who's interested in learning more about that. This work is so fun. It really brings back the magic and into your work. It's magical, and it's exciting to get to see and feel the changes in your clients' bodies and their lives. When I first started doing the pelvic energy piece that I learned in Tammy Lynn's work, I was just helping shift pelvic energy in their pelvis. And then I kept hearing my clients come in, and they're like, well, I'm here because Susie sent me, because Susie said you changed her life. And I kept hearing that over and over again, that I was changing these women's lives, sometimes only seeing them one time. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. That wasn't my intention. I'm just trying to help balance their pelvic energy. But It's changing the way women are showing up in the world. And it's so powerful and it's so important. And I would love to share it with you. So if you are interested in learning more with me, check out my website and learn more about my courses. And I would love to be able to share this fun and magic with you too. So thank you everybody for listening into this episode. Hope you found it helpful. I hope some of my insights are things that can help you on your journey and in your work with either working with your clients or in growing your business. And I thank you for your time. Let's help our moms have more beautiful births and faster recoveries. Thanks, everybody. Take care. See you in the next episode. Bye-bye.
Today's podcast was brought to you by the Institute for Birth Healing. To discover more, visit instituteforbirthhealing.com. To claim $50 off of any online course, use coupon code PODCAST50 at checkout. Till next time, I'm Lynn Schulte, founder of the Institute for Birth Healing.